cautious about, how we do that. I want to reiterate that these chief meetings have been going on since January of 2005. They just didn't start happening. And I also want to reiterate that law enforcement in our office do get along. We do have disagreements, but those disagreements work out. Can you imagine all these law enforcement agencies ever agreeing 100% on everything? It just doesn't happen. I'm going to give you some advice tonight, which I may bring up again, and that is to our community, be very wary of people who conjure up problems and then say they can solve all of them. I just don't think that's the case that my opponent can do. I just think he's making a lot of this stuff up, and he should just be a little more professional about how he is approaching some of these things. He has to realize, as a county commissioner, he is supposed to be supporting our criminal justice system, not tearing it down. He can tear me down, but he doesn't have to tear down a system.
Okay.
Mr. Hanson, I'd like to respond to that.
Okay, we'll do one more round.
I didn't conjure up the plea bargaining rate. I didn't conjure up 71 of 72 charges being dismissed in a high-profile case in this town. I didn't conjure up the comments of the judge that said this was a disorganized office. Those are facts. This isn't anything that I'm making up. These are things that are out there in the press, in the public, and that's what this DA is responsible for. A disorganized office that needs to be tightened up, one that protects you, that makes sure the crime rate goes down, doesn't continue to go up. Something has to change. Something has to make you safer. We've put nearly $300 million into improvements in this community in the last 10 years. From the Rawlings Library down to Gateway Park, to Pro Bowl riders, to DAS Aviations, to Vestas, and I've been involved in virtually all of those decisions. And to turn it over to the criminal element and the graffiti artist is immoral. It's wrong and it's immoral. This community has spent a lot of money to make itself a better community. And to allow that to happen, I think, is just plain wrong.
Bill?
Well, all I have to say is I'm afraid to go outside tonight, the way he's making it sound, and that's just not true. Commissioner Chostner has spent over $100 million in debt in this county. And, when I go over and ask for improvements to our office, paying our prosecutors more money or getting budgetary matters squared away, we can't get it done. In 2011, the domestic violence grant that we had was terminated by the federal government. I requested the money from the county, and I was told no. I was told that we had to cut our employees, and I said, I will not do that. That's too important of a project. And so we cut corners so that we could continue to prosecute domestic violence crimes. Where is he getting this stuff? Doesn't he remember what went on in open chambers and how he voted? Now, the thing about it is that he's not just spending $100 million that we don't have. He's spending lots of money, and the Chieftain editorial in 2010 said that basically he was spending money like it was going out of style. And one of the problems that we've encountered is the judicial building. We can't afford it. We cannot afford that building, and there's a huge problem with that water problem, bigger than anybody realizes, and it's going to cost millions of dollars, you mark my word, to fix that. And we can go into that in just a little bit. That train left the station. We're going to build that building, but what are we going to do now? We've got to figure out a way that we can afford services for public safety in this community without having these grand schemes of all these buildings that he wants to build so his name can be on them.
Okay. Okay. Let's move.
Mr. Henson, I need to address that because those are some pretty spurious allegations. First of all, in 2008, this country went through one of the worst recessions it's had since the 1930s. And every level of government, from the federal government, the state, county, and city, suffered under that. We all went through declining revenues. But we hired people that turned that around, and the commissioners made the right decision. I don't know where this $100 million figure comes from, because if you go and talk to our financial officer right now, he will tell you that we have a balanced budget. From 2008 to this date, we put money back into reserves. We cut our deficit by 4.5%, and we also had the money to be able to build the new judicial building through Excel money and through Black Hills money. There is no deficit. Not only that, after we came out of the recession, we were able to stabilize the workforce, and we gave pay raises this last year. So there is no bleeding deficit that Mr. Tebow would like to comment on here. We are stabilized with this. We're making improvements. Recall when people had criticism about the health department. Where's that criticism today? Now we have a gorgeous building there that serves the needs of the community. Same thing's going to happen with the judicial building. That's going to be a wonderful building for everybody here, and all the people who are critics all want it to be in the ribbon-cutting picture. That's another great asset to this community.
Just one quick comment.
You're wrapping it up, Bill, and we're going to another question.
Okay. Let me tell you what, it's not that rosy. The city-county health department was not paid for by cash, as was promised to this community. There's a 10-year debt that's an interest-only debt. What happens at the end of that 10 years? He knows exactly where that $100 million plus debt is. It's on borrowed money, and any reserve is replenished with borrowed money. When the bonds were issued for the judicial building, they weren't given the highest rating. You know why? Because the county's in tremendous debt. In fact, one of the conditions of letting that money out was that we can't go into any further debt. How are we going to take care of the water problem at the judicial building that has contaminated water going into the city system that could be over capacity? And if it's over capacity and if it's contaminated, we're going to have to build a treatment plant to fix that water. It's the same scenario Colorado Springs presented to us, and we need to be honest with the community and not do all this smoke and mirror stuff that we're in rosy shape. The county finance director met with our office the other day and said we've got to come to some result of dealing with our 2012 budget, and that 2013 is a tight budget. Now that doesn't sound like what my opponent was just saying. We're in tremendous financial problem, and it's going to affect public safety in this community. You mark my word.
We are not, let me lay that to rest. That we are not in financial problems in the county. When we went to talk to Standard & Poor's and Moody's, these are people that are impartial evaluators of budgets. They're not there to give you loans. They're there to see where your weaknesses are. They stress test the county. And when we asked for the money for the judicial building, they said we wish there were more counties that were in the same financial shape as Pueblo County and has the confidence to go forward. So you need to know the facts of outside folks from New York and San Francisco who say the Pueblo County is in good shape. And you need to know those facts from independent, unbiased folks, not those who have a political agenda and want to throw out their own spurious allegations.
Okay. We're going to move on. One way or the other. Okay, I'd like to get another couple questions in before we run out of time. This is a specific question about a couple of approaches. We have had some terrible cases to deal with in the last few years, and in the light of those, I have two questions. One is, what is your position, and Bill, you're answering this first, it's your turn. What is your position on the death penalty? And what is your position on the legislature's recent decision to further restrict the ability of DAs to directly file adult charges against juvenile defendants?
I'll take the latter first. I was against that bill when I was in the Senate, and I'm against that bill now. But it actually passed so that there are restrictions for district attorneys to file direct file cases. That means they can charge certain juveniles as adults. And the reason I was against it was just on principle. The idea that a district attorney is part of the executive office of the state of Colorado, and that we should be making the decisions on whether to file or not file, and not judges. That was just a philosophical decision. The first question that you asked, I think everybody knows the answer to. I'm against the death penalty. I've always been against the death penalty, but I do not enforce the law as I wish it to be. I enforce it as it is written. And I made it clear that if there is a death penalty case, our office will study that and we will bring the death penalty. Now, later in the process, I may seek a challenge of that particular death penalty decision, which I think I have the right to do, but the law will be enforced the way it is written. As far as a couple of other things that I wanted to mention, it's interesting because one of one of the cases that we almost filed the death penalty on was the death of Annette Martinez, the young girl that was stabbed to death at the 7-Eleven on the east side. The reason we didn't is because the perpetrator of the crime pled guilty to the charge of first-degree murder and was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. An example of plea bargaining. The Colorado District Attorney's Council, if you look at the statistics and you really want to know the source, says that our plea bargaining rate is 51%. That means that we lower the charges in 51% of the cases. That's because sometimes witnesses are unavailable, legal impediments come into play, and so on. The statistics that my opponent are giving you are just fabricated and absurd. We sometimes plea to the charge, is what I'm telling you. Is that a plea bargain that's in the 96%? If it is, I think it's a valid plea bargain. We got a conviction to first-degree murder because they pled guilty to the charge. Some charges are reduced 51% of the time. Other charges in other cases are dismissed because you dismiss one case and keep another case. And finally, the judiciary's trials for criminal case in this jurisdiction is on the rise. If it's on the rise, how is the plea bargain situation, detrimental? We are trying the cases we need to try, and we're plea bargaining the cases we need to plea bargain. How do you try 10,000 cases a year in 200 days of judicial availability? You can't. Okay. So they would all be dismissed.
Okay.
You need to think these things through before you make spurious comments, Mr. Opponent.
Okay. Okay. Jeff, we'll let you go a little bit longer. Go ahead.
Thank you. First of all, with regard to the death penalty, it is the law of the state. It has been passed by the legislature, so in that sense, it reflects the will of the people. But it's something that I think, because of the severe nature of the penalty, has to be thought through very, very carefully before it's imposed. And I would be very reluctant to do that. With that said, I can imagine that there are cases where the crime is so heinous that the situation is so depraved that a death penalty would be in order. So I would not leave it out as an option, but I would be reluctant just because of my own personal disposition to go forward with it. With the direct file, I actually think that law was a good law. When you're talking about taking a juvenile and applying adult penalties to the person that could affect them for decades, for a generation, I don't have a problem with letting the judiciary take a look at that and then giving the green light or not to the prosecutor before you go forward with it. I met with a young man today, just kind of coincidentally, who had been involved in an armed robbery and was given a lengthy sentence for it. And he's still paying the penalty for that, even though there's all kinds of indication that he has rehabilitated himself. So I think it's very difficult to go forward with some of these cases without judicial review of it. And finally, with regard from the statistics that I'm talking about, the plea agreement statistics come from the state judiciary. They're not ones that I make up. These are ones that comes from the state judiciary. Same with felony case filings are down 23%. Misdemeanor case filings are down 15%. Traffic case filings are down 13%, and DUI cases are down 13.8%. You can go online and find those statistics yourself. So again, while the county population, which was about 145,000 in the early 2000s, and which is over 160,000 today, our population's up, but our filing is down. The crime rate's up and filings are down. We're not doing our job as effectively as we need to.
Steve, one quick. If you really look at the statistics, you will learn that, and you know what's going on in the community, it's the police officers who issue the traffic tickets. So if they're down, that's because the police aren't writing the tickets. We do not go out and write the tickets.